Welcome back to our channel, dedicated viewers. Today is a beautiful day to dive deep into the dramatic, ever-evolving world of daytime television. Grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let us explore the latest explosive twists that are about to change everything in Los Angeles. The sterile, unforgiving fluorescent lights of the Los Angeles hospital hummed a low, monotonous tune as the graveyard shift dragged into its final, agonizing hours. Dr. John Finnegan, exhausted to his very core, rubbed his weary eyes as he navigated the quiet corridors back to his private office. It had been a grueling, relentless night of saving lives, making split-second medical decisions, and offering comfort to families in their darkest moments of despair. Finn's entire existence was built upon the foundation of healing, of mending broken things, and of providing a safe harbor for those in pain. Yet, as he pushed open the heavy wooden door to his sanctuary, he was completely oblivious to the fact that his own life, his marriage, and his entire perception of reality were about to be violently, irreparably shattered into a million jagged pieces. The stark contrast between the noble, selfless work he had just performed and the dark, sinister betrayal waiting for him on his desk was a cruel irony that would soon redefine his entire world. There, resting ominously in the center of his meticulously organized desk, was a thick, unmarked yellow manila envelope. It bore no return address, no postage stamp, and no indication of its origin. It simply sat there, a silent, anonymous messenger of doom, demanding his immediate attention. Finn frowned, his medical mind momentarily confused by the breach of hospital protocol. Mail was never delivered directly to his desk in the middle of the night, especially not anonymous packages. A strange, icy prickle of unease washed over his skin, an instinctual warning from deep within his subconscious that something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. He slowly approached the desk, his exhausted body suddenly flooded with a surge of adrenaline. The envelope seemed to mock him in the dim light of the office, its yellow surface glowing with a toxic, radioactive intensity. For a fleeting moment, Finn considered sweeping it into the trash, leaving the mystery unsolved. But human curiosity, coupled with a growing sense of dread, forced his hand. With trembling fingers, Finn picked up the envelope. It was heavy, substantial, filled with what felt like thick, glossy paper. He slid his thumb under the sealed flap, the sharp tearing sound of the paper echoing like a gunshot in the deafening silence of his office. He reached inside and pulled out a stack of high-definition, 8x10 photographs. As his tired eyes focused on the top image, all the air was violently sucked from his lungs. The world around him spun out of control, the sterile white walls of his office closing in on him as a wave of profound, suffocating nausea crashed over his entire being. It felt as though a jagged, rusted knife had been plunged directly into his chest, twisting viciously into his heart. He collapsed heavily into his leather office chair, his legs suddenly unable to support the weight of the catastrophic truth that was now burning into his retinas. The photographs were undeniably, devastatingly clear. The setting was unmistakable, the luxurious, modern CEO office of Forrester Creations, a room Finn had visited countless times to surprise his beautiful wife with lunch or a bouquet of roses. But the scene captured in these glossy, high-definition images was not one of corporate strategy or fashion design. It was a scene of raw, unbridled, and deeply intimate betrayal. There, entangled in a compromising, highly explicit position on the office sofa, was his wife, Steffy Forrester Finnegan. Her clothes were discarded, her body pressed desperately against another man. And the man holding her, the man betraying his own marriage vows in the very heart of the Forrester empire, was none other than Carter Walton, the chief operating officer of Forrester Creations. A man Finn had considered a trusted colleague, a man of profound honor, and a friend. The sheer, unadulterated visual proof of their drunken, passionate affair was a psychological blow so severe that Finn literally gasped for breath. his hands shaking violently as he dropped the photos onto his desk as if they were engulfed in flames. The absolute destruction of John Finnegan's trust began to ripple through his mind, tearing down the towering pedestal upon which he had placed his wife. Finn had worshipped Steffy. He had looked at her with the kind of reverent adoration reserved for a goddess. In his eyes, she was the epitome of strength, purity, and unwavering loyalty. He had constantly praised her honesty, her fierce dedication to their family, and her moral superiority. He had spent the last several weeks groveling at her feet, begging for her forgiveness because he had accidentally hidden the fact that his biological mother, Sheila Carter, had been on his commercial flight to Monaco. He had allowed Steffy to berate him, to throw her wedding ring at him on a European beach, and to treat him like a criminal for a momentary lapse in judgment. And while he was agonizing over his mistake, frantically booking flights to rush home and save his marriage, his pristine, morally superior wife was stripping off her clothes and falling into the arms of another man. The hypocrisy was so staggering, so deeply offensive, that it made Finn's blood run cold. The betrayal was twofold, a double-edged sword that sliced through every relationship he held dear. Carter Walton was not just a random stranger. He was a pillar of the Forrester family business, a man who had officiated weddings, a man who stood as a beacon of integrity. Finn knew intimately the struggles Carter was facing. He knew that Daphne Rose Walton, Carter's wife, had recently received a devastating diagnosis of severe infertility and premature menopause from Finn's own adoptive mother, Dr. Lee Finnegan. He knew that Carter was supposedly grieving the loss of his dream to have biological children. Yet, instead of honoring his vows and supporting his devastated wife, Carter had chosen to drown his sorrows in alcohol and exploit Steffy's vulnerability. The sheer moral bankruptcy of both Steffy and Carter in that moment was a revelation that fundamentally altered Finn's perception of humanity. They were not the noble, upstanding individuals they pretended to be. They were selfish, reckless, and deeply flawed liars. As Finn sat paralyzed in his office chair, staring blankly at the scattered photographs, the chaotic puzzle pieces of the past few weeks began to violently snap into place. He thought back to Steffy's behavior since her abrupt return from Monaco. She had been highly volatile, prone to sudden, explosive mood swings, and plagued by an intense, crushing anxiety that seemed to consume her every waking moment. When Finn had questioned her, when he had tried to comfort her, Steffy had consistently blamed her fragile mental state on the looming threat of Sheila Carter. She had tearfully claimed that she was suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder, that the mere thought of Sheila being near their family was triggering debilitating panic attacks. Finn, the devoted doctor and loving husband, had believed every single word. He had held her as she cried, he had promised to protect her, and he had taken the full burden of the blame onto his own shoulders. But now, staring at the undeniable photographic evidence of her infidelity, the sickening, toxic truth washed over him. The PTSD, the panic attacks, the tears, the constant, obsessive fear of Sheila Carter, it had all been a meticulously crafted, manipulative charade. Steffy had weaponized her own history as a victim. She had used his biological mother's dark, violent legacy as a convenient, impenetrable shield to mask the suffocating, toxic guilt of her own marital betrayal. She hadn't been shaking in fear of Sheila, she had been shaking in terror that Finn would discover she had slept with Carter Walton. The realization that his wife had psychologically manipulated him, using his deep-seated guilt over Sheila to blind him to her own sins, was a psychological violation that cut deeper than the physical act of the affair itself. Steffy had looked him dead in the eyes, accepted his desperate apologies, and allowed him to believe he was the villain of their marriage, all while harboring the ultimate, marriage-destroying secret. In that sterile, quiet hospital office, the gentle, endlessly forgiving Dr. John Finnegan died. The man who always sought compromise, who always saw the best in people, and who constantly sacrificed. His own pride to maintain the peace was eradicated by the devastating reality of those photographs. In his place, a new man emerged from the ashes of his shattered marriage. A cold, hardened, and ruthlessly calculating man. The blinding, agonizing grief that had initially paralyzed him began to burn away, replaced by a chilling, razor-sharp fury. He slowly reached out and gathered the photographs, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the glossy paper. The anger radiating from his dark eyes was absolute and uncompromising. He had been played for a fool, he had been manipulated, lied to, and humiliated by the woman he loved more than life itself. And he was not going to let her get away with it. Finn's initial, primal instinct was to storm out of the hospital, drive recklessly to the cliff house, and throw the photographs directly into Steffy's face. He wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, to watch her pristine, arrogant facade crumble into dust as she realized her filthy secret was exposed. He wanted to drag Carter Walton out of his bed and beat him until his hands were bloody. But as his medical, analytical mind took over, he stopped himself. A direct, emotional confrontation was exactly what Steffy would want. She was a master manipulator, a woman raised in the cutthroat world of Forrester creations. If he confronted her now, she would immediately spin the narrative. She would cry, she would blame the trauma of the Monaco trip, she would blame the alcohol, and incredibly, she would somehow find a way to blame Finn and Sheila for pushing her to the brink. She would use the massive wealth, power, and influence of the Forrester family machine to paint herself as the tragic victim of circumstance. Finn refused to play her game. He refused to give her the opportunity to control the fallout. Instead, a chilling, masterful plan of vengeance began to form in his brilliant mind. Silence would become his ultimate, most deadly weapon. He would not say a word about the anonymous yellow envelope. He would not confront her, he would not yell, and he would not show a single crack in his demeanor. He would return to the cliff house in the morning, smile warmly, kiss her on the cheek, and continue to play the role of the devoted, oblivious, and endlessly apologetic husband. He would lull Steffy Forrester Finnegan into a false sense of absolute, impenetrable security. He would let her believe that her manipulative charade had worked perfectly, that her secret was safe forever, and that she had successfully buried her sins. He would watch her play the perfect wife and mother, knowing all the while that she was a fraud. The psychological torture of knowing her secret while she believed she was safe would be the first phase of his retribution. But the silence was merely the foundation of a much larger, far more devastating strike. Behind the scenes, operating in the shadows with absolute precision, Finn would begin to dismantle her life. His ultimate, non-negotiable goal was not just a divorce. It was the complete and total custody of their children. He loved Hayes and Kelly with every fiber of his being, and he would be damned if he allowed them to be raised by a woman whose entire existence was built on a foundation of lies, manipulation, and moral bankruptcy. He knew that taking on the Forrester family and family court would be a monumental, grueling battle. They had limitless financial resources and the best attorneys in Los Angeles. But Finn now possessed the ultimate trump card. These high-definition photographs, combined with the timeline of her deception and her documented, erratic behavior, would be the cornerstone of his legal strategy. Finn would meticulously gather evidence. He would hire the most ruthless, aggressive family law attorneys he could find, operating under strict confidentiality agreements. He would document every instance of Steffy's volatile behavior, every lie she told about her mental state, and every moment she used Sheila as an excuse to mask her guilt. He would build an airtight, impenetrable legal case proving moral turpitude, psychological instability, and parental unfitness. He would wait patiently, biding his time, enduring the agonizing pain of sleeping next to a woman who had betrayed him until the trap was perfectly set. And when the time was right, when Steffy was at her most confident and secure, he would drop the legal hammer with apocalyptic force. He imagined the moment the process server would hand her the custody papers. He imagined the look of sheer, unadulterated terror on her face when she realized that he had known about Carter all along, that every smile he had given her for months was a calculated lie, and that he was taking the children away from her. The thought brought a dark, twisted sense of satisfaction to his shattered heart. Steffy Forrester Finnegan had always believed she was untouchable. She believed that her family name, her wealth, and her beauty shielded her from the consequences of her actions. She thought she could have her cake and eat it to enjoying the stability of her marriage to Finn while indulging in a drunken, passionate affair with Carter Walton. But she had vastly underestimated the man she married. As the first rays of dawn began to peek through the blinds of his hospital office, casting long, dramatic shadows across the room, Finn carefully placed the photographs back into the yellow manila envelope. He sealed it tightly and locked it away in the bottom drawer of his desk, turning the key with a definitive, resounding click. The physical evidence was secured, but the emotional transformation within him was permanent. He stood up, his exhaustion entirely replaced by a cold, burning resolve. He adjusted his white doctor's coat, a symbol of his integrity, and prepared to end his shift. He was going home to his wife. He was going to look into her beautiful, lying eyes and tell her how much he loved her. And the countdown to the absolute destruction of Steffy Forrester Finnegan's perfect world would officially begin. The era of the gentle, forgiving John Finnegan was dead and buried. The era of ruthless, calculated vengeance had arrived, and Los Angeles would never be the same again.